Greetings all, this is Nick of the Extra Hairy Variety. Welcome to the new channel, a place for us to talk about all things gaming and pop culture that aren't related to X-Wing. For those of you who are new to this channel, who aren't aware of the other stuff I do on YouTube, I have a main channel where I talk mainly about the tabletop game X-Wing. For those of you who already follow what I do, this will be a place for everything that's not involved. We'll talk more about that at the end of the video. But for the time being, let's talk about Star Wars Legion. Yes, I haven't spoken about this game in a while. I spoke about it for a while on the main channel, and I really wanted to get back into it because today we had a new article on a new piece of terrain, the Downed AT-ST, and this is very curious because FFG, with all the new items coming out, I've kind of been feeling that they got past the point of just sort of trying to populate the game of Legion, so we have sort of one of everything. And the last article we had before this was about Sabine and Bosk, these two really new, exciting, flavorful world-building characters. And I thought, oh, okay, so we're past the bit where we just have all the basic units. Now we're doing some fun stuff. But the Downed AT-ST actually feels like it's adding another element to the core part of the game. It seems like FFG are hinting at different ways to play the game beyond just the regular competitive tournaments, which is really good. I like competitive tournaments. I think in the game of X-Wing, for example, it's a fantastic thing because the game is sort of designed to be shorter. You don't need to paint your models, it's easier to do. With Legion, I feel like while it's great to have that competitive side to it, having these more sort of casual formats where you play sort of longer campaigns feels like a strong move, and I think FFG have really sort of listened to the community on this one, so that's really cool. Enough on that, let's actually talk about this expansion. First of all, and since I last spoke about Legion here on YouTube, they've added this to their articles, and I'm so grateful for this. I think it's like a 3D rendering of the CAD file they use during development. And this is fantastic because one of the main draws for Legion is the quality of the minis. People want to know ahead of time how good the sculpts are. People were sort of questioning the earlier sculpts, specifically like Han Solo and Princess Leia. So doing this in all the new articles, I think is a very strong move. So well done for FFG for doing that. And yeah, this just looks really, really cool. Doesn't seem to be anything like radically different from their regular sculpt of the AT-ST that already exists in the game, apart from the fact that they've got a lump of rocks and just squashed into it. But that's absolutely fine. The sculpt was already fantastic as is, so absolutely no complaints there. Let's have a look at the spread for this one and see what we have in the box, because apart from the model itself, we actually have a few new game cards to help us play the game in a different kind of way. Now this is your standard battlefield deployment, condition and mission objectives cards, but they're a bit different from the regular cards. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the core game of Legion, you draft the cards at the start of the game where you have these three different stacks, deployment, objectives, and conditions. And sort of between you and your opponent, you sort of semi-randomly, semi-selectively draft out one of each, so you have a unique battle scenario. However, with the AT-ST cards, these are specific for the use of the AT-ST, and it looks like they actually have to be used together as well. So you wouldn't really be able to draft them in the same way, and that's not a bad thing. I think for competitive tournament play, you could just chuck this on the table as another piece of terrain, but the idea of this is we're setting up scenarios that can do across multiple games, which is really, really cool. Legion is that kind of game that does take a lot of setup, so I feel like having a greater reason than just playing 3 random tournament games. Say you go over to a friend's house and that kind of thing, having like a good reason to bring over everything and set up sort of for multiple campaigns and you know, what happens in the first game affects the second game feels like a really strong idea, and it's exemplified in the cards we get here. First of all, with this deployment card with Forces Converge, and this is sort of similar to a card we've seen in the standard game called the Long March. The Long March has a deployment zone of up to 3 on a block on either side. This only has a width of 2, and that's only in the corners. You actually only have a width of 1 going up the edge of the table. The blue player must play the Imperial faction and the red player must play the Rebel faction. During Act 1, each unique unit that is defeated and each unique upgrade equipped to a unit that is defeated is set aside and cannot be included in an army during Act 2. Now, this article does not explain what Act 1 and 2 means. It could mean several different things. It could be the halves of a game, like the first 3 rounds and the last 3 rounds. It could be 3 acts in round 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. If there's any kind of special rules where you redeploy units. But I think the most likely explanation here is the different acts are simply different games. Act 1 is the first game you play. Act 2 is the second. Maybe they're creating scenarios where you have specifically 2-act campaigns, maybe 3 or 4. I don't know. This is all new stuff, but it's really interesting because apart from the fact that it's a really cool casual format entering into the game, it has real list building implications, because if you take things like Luke, Vader, Han Solo, General Veers, and they die, they can't be used later. It's worth thinking about whether you want to put those guys in your original army. Maybe you want to think about having them in reserves for Act 2 or even 3 if that's a thing. And that really does affect the way you play. Maybe different units will function better in different acts. Maybe it's worth having things like Vader to store for later acts because they're more impactful later in the game, when maybe your opponent's forces are a bit more weakened and they are better at finishing things off. Maybe some units are better to start out with. This is awesome. This is really cool. And more to the point, this is something that the game of X-Wing clearly does not have. And I think, FFG are pushing all these different really cool Star Wars IPs, and they really have to find ways to make Legion sort of stand out on its own. It can't just be another thing where you have standardized lists and tournament play and copy-paste net lists and there you go. That's not a bad thing, but it's a thing that we already have in other games. And frankly, I think other games like X-Wing just do it a bit cleaner than Legion. So yeah, this is really cool. Also revealed in this article, we have Secure the Intel, again, Act 1, and this is a mission objectives card. While there are no objectives tokens in play, each unit and specialist trooper unit that has a unit leader in base contact with a downed AT-ST terrain piece gains action extract. In other words, you have to use your entire activation to get the objective token out of the AT-ST unless you have free actions as well. While an objective token is in play, each unit and specialist trooper unit has action claim. So basically what this is saying is if one of your opponent or if your unit drops the objective tokens because they're defeated, you can move another unit onto that and you only need to use one action to pick that up. Also, it's worth pointing out the first part of this paragraph talking about the action extract is only able to be done when there's no token in play. So once it's been taken out of the AT-ST, that's literally the only token. And as you can see, victory. A player wins and gains 1 victory token if at the end of the game they control a unit with a claimed objective token. I think the fact that we have a double action to get that extract, you really have to sacrifice the amount of play effectiveness that unit that goes into the middle of the board has to do. It sounds like a very dangerous thing to try and take what is essentially the only victory point in the game. This feels like a very sort of spiky game format, but at the same time, yes, it's more geared towards casual play, so I think that's okay. One last thing we had revealed, and this is only viewable on the spread, is this condition card, the downed AT-ST in Act 1. At the start of the place terrain step, place the downed AT-ST terrain piece in the center of the battlefield. And yes, it does specify at the start of the place terrain step, so you can't accidentally put stuff in the way of it. Which means also that the AT-ST counts as a piece of terrain, so it counts towards the quota of being roughly 25% of the board, distance from other terrain. All those kind of rules come into play. So that works quite cleanly. And you also notice that all of these cards have the AT-ST symbol in the top right hand corner. That's how you know you're playing this campaign. And also one more thing, the article does specify that it comes with 6 cards. So there will be one more of each of these different kinds of cards. You can actually see that in the spread. There's one more deployment, objectives and condition card right behind those ones. I'm guessing those are going to relate to the Act 2. So we have a very set campaign. There's no drafting, there's no randomization. I'm curious to see whether there's any way to integrate the randomized cards into this, but I don't think that's what FFG are going for. And I think having a clear, separate thing from the competitive way of playing the game is a great option. It's just what the game needs. And currently, that's all the information we have on this expansion so far. FFG are advertising this as being released in the second quarter. In the meantime, guys, thank you so much for watching. We have plenty more Legion spoilers to talk about that came out in the past few weeks, so if you'd like to see them, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon if you want to see the notifications. Please follow me on all my social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. If you'd like to support the Patreon, I greatly appreciate that too. It really is what keeps the lights on this channel. And just at the end of this video, I do also want to mention thank you for everyone that has supported me while I was covering Legion in the past. The clear reason why I've had to make a separate channel simply is because on the main channel, if I talk about anything but X-Wing, it slows down the views, it slows down the subscriber count. I've known for a long time that in order to sort of cover Legion and all the other different Star Wars games that FFG makes and other tabletop games and possibly even video games, I really had to make a separate channel. And now that I'm in this new space, I have more time to work on this kind of stuff, so I've decided I'd pull the trigger and this is when I'm going to start doing it. So thank you for everyone for the support. I know a lot of you have been asking about when I'm going to cover Legion again, and here's your answer. It's right now. In the meantime, guys, thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next video.